Well, once more on the programme, here I am on the outskirts of Nailsea with the mole catcher, Bob Woodbury. No mole, no fee. Let's have a word about the creature itself. I mean, I must say that to me the mole is an appealing creature. I mean, it's a lovely, attractive little creature, but it can cause havoc with lawns, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, they are officially classed as vermin, so we shouldn't be too worried about that. You always get a problem with people who've looked after their lawns properly and spent a lot of money on it, and they get a mole in the middle of it, and of course it destroys what they want. And there's always one certain way of attracting a mole, and I've had this happen a number of times. People have looked at their garden over a number of years and decided it needs a good revamp, and they've scraped off the topsoil, got a man in, levelled it all out, put down some nice soil, and put down some lovely turf, often the most expensive turf, and then normally the man says, well, what you ought to do now is sprinkle it. And you can guarantee that when somebody puts down a brand new lawn, that's the time that the mole arrives.
Why do the moles get attracted to that?
Well, what they're after really is food stuff, and of course that is why you have moles in any particular area where you've got fertile soil where their food stuff is there, largely earthworms.
And they can cause a lot of damage, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work in playing fields, sports areas, where of course it can be a hazard to children, where if you have, as you can feel here when you walk along, you've got the tunnels under the soil, and as you walk along you can feel your feet sinking into it. So if you've got them in a sports field, football field, it can be quite treacherous.
I got a memory that one of the kings of England, his horse tripped in a molehill many, many years ago.
Yeah, you've got a better memory than me for history, but yes, I think you're right there, yeah.
Just describe the creature for people that don't know. I mean, they would have probably seen cartoons featuring moles. What do they look like? Well,
they're anything in colour from a silver grey to a black. You can get the occasional albino one. They've got a pointy head and little hollows where the eyes are. People think they're blind. In fact, they're not. They can see. They can distinguish dark and light. They're about the size, if you put your hand out from your middle of your middle finger down to your end of your hand there, and they're about 120 grams in size. The male's slightly bigger than the females. Big front paddles on the front, which is where they do all the digging, and small rear feet, and little tail, which they use to run along the tunnel, which they in fact hold up along the top of the tunnel.
I've actually seen a mole on a road many years ago, but they're rarely above ground.
Rarely above ground, because that's when they're under most threat from predators. That's why they stay underground. They will move over ground, particularly in the breeding season, when the males leave their own territory and go to the females and obviously mate, and that's the end of that. Once a year. That's the only time they get together. Very, very territorial. They don't stand each other's company. When the young are born, and as they're coming out now, they have to go away from any other moles. So if you have a mole and it's got a female, then effectively you could end up with 3 or 4 other moles which will have to get away from the female to set up its own territory, and they will march across ground, gradually creating more and more molehills.
You said a moment ago that they're not blind, they can sense light and they've got sort of rudimentary eyesight. I imagine when they come up on the ground they're sort of blinking at the brightness of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure they can blink really. I don't think they've got eyelids as such, but yes, they will not come above ground unless they need to. They are really under threat then from the natural predators that are about. Buzzards, weasels, stoats, foxes will get after them as well, and badgers in particular will dig up moles. They will go down. I've had a number of times traps dug out of the ground, and I've found them nearby in a hedge, and there's obviously a badger come along and had that mole away.
Is it possible to eat mole meat, do you know, Bob?
Well, funnily enough, there's a publication been around a long time called The Countryman's Weekly, of all things, and I remember reading that going back 3 or 4 years ago about an old gentleman in the 1800s who was he was supposedly famous for having eaten every single kind of wildlife in the UK, and he was reported to have said the only meat he would never ever touch again was a mole. And that's actually supported by what I see with cats. A number of cats will catch moles and pick them up and bring them in, but although they'll eat mice, they will not touch a mole. And if I've made the mistake occasionally of having had a mole hanging around the van for a couple more hours than it should have done, I can understand why you wouldn't want to eat a mole.